If Cambria can't answer a phone call at midnight, maybe she's not cut out for billion-dollar systems. That was the line spoken by a man in cufflinks, who'd never written a single line of code. Tossed off in front of HR like I was just another burnt-out mid-level cog. No emergency, no incident, just a missed call at 12:02 a.m., and that call it wasn't critical. It wasn't even about the system. It was a loyalty test. A trap dressed as leadership. I'm Cambria Wells, Principal Systems Architect at Venturon Technologies. For 7 years, I built Ravenlock, an autonomous routing engine that rewrote what defense networks could do. I lived in the architecture, every layer of encryption, every failsafe. I engineered a future no one thought possible. I was also the kind of woman who never left a bug unresolved, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, the kind who skipped every holiday dinner, rescheduled birthdays, and missed my best friend's wedding just to finish version 4.6. And yet, the moment I didn't pick up one unexpected call in the middle of the night, I was dismissed like I'd never mattered. I didn't ignore the call. I didn't hear it because I was asleep for the first time in 4 days, not by choice. 3 nights before that call, my mother had collapsed. I spent 72 hours sitting beside her hospital bed, monitoring machines instead of networks. The moment she stabilized, I returned to the office without a word because the demo was looming and Blaine had moved the launch up again. In the next 11 days, I logged 173 consecutive hours finalizing code, verifying signal pathways, and running back-end redundancy tests. My team had gone home. I stayed. I always stayed. That night I had run one last stress test until 10:36 p.m., verified the satellite interface, and finally barely made it home. My shoes were still on when I passed out. When the call came at las 12:02 l2m, my phone was on silent, face down on the counter. I didn't even know it happened. I woke 6 hours later with lines on my cheek from the throw pillow, still in yesterday's clothes. I didn't know it yet, but the system I had built, layer by layer, safeguard by safeguard, had already started protecting itself. And they had already begun trying to erase me. At 6:11 a.m., my phone buzzed softly against the coffee table, dragging me out of a dreamless, muscle-deep sleep. I blinked. The morning light was just beginning to peek through the blinds, casting long gray streaks across the hardwood floor. My jaw ached from sleeping against my arm, my back from the couch, my eyes from everything else. I reached for the phone, expecting Slack pings, maybe a GitHub commit notice, or a time-stamped QA pass. Instead, there it was. Subject line: Notice of immediate termination. Insubordination incident logged. My breath caught. I opened the email. Each word hit like gravel in the mouth. You are hereby terminated. Effective immediately, for failure to respond to an urgent after-hours escalation. No greeting, no signature, no context. I checked the sender, HR. Time received, 5:59 a.m. For a moment, I didn't move. The heat in my chest didn't match the cool morning air. I scrolled again, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something logical. Nothing changed. I tried Slack. My account had already been disabled. Access revoked, erased. I sat up, limbs heavy. My blouse was still wrinkled from yesterday. My shoes were somewhere near the door, but I couldn't remember taking them off. I felt like I was watching someone else's life implode from just outside the frame. I checked my call log. There it was, 12:02 a.m., one missed call from Blaine Renoir. So that's what this was about. I didn't answer a midnight call after 11 days straight on the Ravenlock project. After 73 hours by my mother's side at the hospital. After staying until 10:36 p.m. triple-checking fallback protocols. And now I was out. No conversation, no warning, just gone. My fingers moved on autopilot, opening my personal laptop. I still had back-end access for 24 more hours unless someone manually revoked it early. I pulled up the server logs, navigated to the HR audit trail. The line that sealed everything showed up in pale gray. Termination. Notice scheduled for delivery at 9:47 p.m. I froze. That was over 2 hours before the call. They'd already decided. The call at 12:02 a.m. wasn't urgent. It wasn't even real. It was a prop. A staged escalation to justify a decision that had already been made. A trap. I leaned back, stunned. The room was still. My phone lay silent beside me. I wanted to scream, to call someone, to demand a face-to-face. But there was no one left to call. My thoughts drifted to the system, the 17-tier encryption framework I had spent years building. I wondered if they were trying to run the demo without me. I wondered if anyone even knew about the last layer. I had written the final protocol in secret for a reason. But at this moment, I didn't feel brilliant. I didn't feel powerful. I felt erased. I stood slowly and crossed to the window. Outside, the street was quiet. A man walked his dog. A paperboy tossed a bundled headline onto someone's porch. The world hadn't noticed I was gone, but somewhere I knew the system had. I had coded it to respond quietly under specific conditions. An unfair termination without final sign-off was one of them. My laptop chimed. An automated ping from my personal Ravenlock mirror. I opened it. Freeze protocol executed. Timestamp 5:59 a.m. My eyes locked on the line the exact moment HR's email was delivered. The system shut itself down. I stared at the screen and for the first time since waking up, I exhaled. I hadn't just built a system, I had built protection. And while they were busy scrubbing my name from team directories, they had no idea they'd already triggered their own shutdown. But I knew, and now I wasn't just out. I was holding the key. I didn't move right away. After everything, I had just relived years of sacrifice coded into a mesh and I let the silence stretch. I needed a full breath, just one, to remind myself I was still here, still conscious, still in control. The rage I thought might rise never came. What arrived instead was something far colder. Composure. I turned back to my laptop and opened the mirror node. A private interface I'd built years ago to reflect real-time status from Ravenlock's core system without triggering internal alerts. It was like standing behind a two-way mirror, watching the machine breathe. The system app opened in full resolution. 17 layers, 17 rings of logic nested like a living shell, each one pulsing quietly. Status stable except one. Layer 17 was marked. Status, locked. Protocol, freeze protocol active. I clicked deeper into the log feed. A scroll of entries appeared, time-stamped with nanosecond precision. I narrowed my focus to the most recent trigger. There it was. Activation time. 5:59 a.m. I leaned in. 5:59 a.m., the exact moment HR's email had landed in my inbox. I pulled up my inbox again to be sure. Still there. Still 5:59 a.m. The match wasn't accidental. The system hadn't lagged. It hadn't guessed. It had responded just as I designed it to. I exhaled, slow, steady, not victorious, but centered. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't sabotage. This was engineering. 4 nights ago, when I first embedded the contingency clause into layer 17, I'd written 2 trigger conditions. If I'm terminated unfairly and the company doesn't have my signature on record, the system automatically locks itself. I hadn't coded them in anger. I'd coded them in self-defense. Because I knew what happened to women like me in tech, especially ones who built something too valuable to be ignored, yet too inconvenient to be kept. And now the machine I'd built, the one I fed with sleepless nights and silent compromises, had made a decision. It had followed the logic I wrote in a hospital waiting room while my mother slept post-surgery. They terminated me without cause. They never obtained my biometric clearance. Both conditions were met. The system froze, not because I told it to, but because they broke the rules. I checked access logs. Dozens of entries, all marked with failed attempts to override Layer 17's lock. Most from internal IPs, a few from elevated credentials. None succeeded. They were scrambling. I imagined the chaos, engineers trying to override subroutines they'd never seen before. Executives calling for emergency meetings without realizing the system was no longer listening. Ravenlock had gone, quiet, but it wasn't broken, it was waiting, and I wasn't panicked. I wasn't worried. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt still. They thought removing me would go unnoticed. They didn't know that, buried beneath all the visible architecture, was a quiet heartbeat that didn't ask permission to defend itself. And now that it had, I had no intention of rushing in to rescue them. My silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I didn't need to fight for control. I already had it. And they hadn't even realized it was missing yet. Blaine Renor adjusted his cufflinks with mechanical precision as he stepped into the executive briefing suite. The room gleamed white leather chairs, a 12-foot LED wall, and for national defense reps waiting in tailored suits and calm skepticism, cameras were positioned discreetly, ready to capture his perfect smile. Everything had to look seamless, controlled, ironic, given what was about to unfold. Gentlemen, Blaine beamed, voice practiced. Today, you'll see the future of autonomous surveillance. What they didn't see were the frantic messages already lighting up his private terminal. UI won't load full structure. Layer 17 unresponsive. Backup node not responding either. Authorization error. Should we delay? Blaine's jaw twitched. He typed back, terse, patch it. Use the last stable build. Go live in 15. Behind the LED wall. Tech leads stared at frozen command panels. Diagnostics were green except for one thin red bar across the top reading authorization layer. Blaine didn't notice it yet. He smoothed his blazer, nodded to the AV coordinator, and stepped up to the demo podium. We've rebuilt Ravenlock from the ground up for reliability, speed, and adaptive control in any battlefield scenario. At the very same moment, back in my apartment, I sipped lukewarm coffee and refreshed the mirror node interface. Ravenlock was online, system stable, core functions intact, but layer 17 remained locked. Authorization missing. Override attempts, 3 failed. They were trying and failing. Blaine's voice poured through the live stream, smooth and confident. Today, we'll walk you through real-time satellite handoffs, AI-driven recon paths, and failover protocols, all live. Then came the first break. A technician leaned in and whispered into Blaine's earpiece. His voice didn't move, but his practiced cadence stuttered half a second before recovering. Inside the control room, commands were bouncing back. Errors. Authorization failed. Biometric signature not found. Layer 17. Access denied. System response. Timeout. Try override again. Someone hissed. Which one? All of them. Blaine muted his mic. Did we get Cambria's sign-off before she left? Silence. No, he snapped. Then spoof it. We've got 5 minutes. The engineer's hands hovered, uncertain. We don't have her token. Layer 17 needs her actual biometric signature. The line on the screen didn't blink, it simply held. They weren't locked out because of a bug. They were locked out because the system had chosen not to open. Back on the live stream, Blaine stalled with small talk, gesturing vaguely at past milestones while staff scrambled behind the scenes. I watched from my laptop as another override failed, this one logged from Blaine's own admin ID. Override attempt denied. A message appeared on my phone, from Logan Kim, one of my old engineers. They're panicking. Demo's stuck. Blaine's blaming you. Want to talk? I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Instead, I pulled up the command queue. Ravenlock's surface remained calm. But beneath it, a storm of failed requests rippled across the mirror logs. In the boardroom, one of the military officials finally asked, "Are we seeing the system today or just highlights?" Blaine's smile strained. He glanced to the side. His tech lead gave the faintest shake of the head. "It's internalist security protocol," the lead tech offered. That word internal landed like a confession. For the first time since this began, Blaine Renner realized what it meant to launch something he didn't understand or own. At 10:17 a.m., a hush rippled through the room like static over the LED wall behind Blaine. The slick animated interface vanished. In its place appeared a single line of text centered on a matte gray background. Authorization incomplete. Signature missing. No red alert. No sirens. Just silence and that one clinical, unblinking message. Blaine's smile froze in real time. He turned slightly, as if someone had whispered a joke he didn't understand. "That's one of our secondary verification screens," he offered, eyes darting toward the tech crew. "Should clear any second now." But no one responded. No one moved. A defense contractor shifted in his seat. Another leaned forward, elbows on knees, narrowing his gaze. A woman from the investment group tapped her pen once, sharply, in the control room just beyond the glass. A junior engineer stared at the console, hand still hovering over the refresh key. It's not clearing," he muttered. "What's it looking for?" The lead text snapped. "Authorization token. Layer 17 says biometric signature missing." "What signature?" "I don't know. It just says it's not there." "Overwrite it." "We've already tried 3 times." Back on the main floor, Blaine's earpiece crackled. He turned away from the guests and muttered low, "Tell me what's happening." The voice came fast and nervous. "Systems locked at layer 17. It's asking for a biometric signature. We think it's Cambria's. We don't have confirmation." Blaine's nostrils flared. You're telling me no one can get past this screen? No one authorized, the voice said. Blaine exhaled through his teeth, turned back to the room, and tried again. We're just recalibrating a security layer. Protocols this sophisticated sometimes overdefend. Better safe than sorry, right? No one laughed at home. I watched it all unfold. The mirror node displayed the exact same screen, now blocking every command in that pristine boardroom. I had written that message myself, nearly 2 years ago, short, neutral, unhackable. The system wasn't crashing. It was waiting for me. At las 10:17 a.m., the system moved to its final failsafe state. Not error. Not failure. Just lockdown. Layer 17 had detected the absence of a verified biometric signature and triggered the public display message. They could still access basic visuals view documents, open mock panels, but any attempt to engage real functionality hit the wall. I checked the logs. Override attempt 4. 9:57 a.m. denied. Override. Attempt 5. Las 10:02 RTM. Denied. Public failsafe message triggered. Las 10:17 a.m. They were trying, but didn't know what they were missing. Someone in the tech room finally asked the right question. What signature is it looking for exactly? Cambria's, I think, another answered. She never submitted the final version. Said she'd finalize before deployment. The room fell quiet again. Then came the whisper no one wanted to say aloud. So she's the only one who can unlock the system. The silence that followed said it all. Back at my desk, I didn't answer the email that came through at 10:21 a.m. Subject, urgent signature confirmation request. I didn't take the call that followed 2 minutes later, and I didn't reply. 2. Logan's second message. Blaine's freaking out. Just say something, anything. I simply watched. The system wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as I designed it, and now they were finally discovering what it meant to build something around one person and then try to erase her. I closed the mirror window and stood. The screen behind Blaine still displayed the message. It would stay there until I returned my name to the system, and I had no intention of doing that, not yet. The message remained. Authorization incomplete. Signature missing. I leaned back, crossed my arms, and stared at the mirror node. I didn't need to monitor the logs anymore. There was nothing left to prove. They'd locked themselves out. I just happened to be the one holding the key. I reached for my coffee. It had gone cold again, but I didn't mind. That line on their screen in that boardroom was more than a system alert. It was a reminder. They thought they had everything, but they never had me. My eyes flicked to the timestamp. Again, 10:17 a.m., the exact moment the system spoke for me, because I wasn't in the room to speak for myself. I didn't need to be. Not anymore. And still, memories came like clockwork, uninvited, but sharp. There was the company's first big investor pitch back in year 3. I'd built Ravenlock's routing engine from scratch, debugged every nested loop by hand. But when the slide deck was shown, the lead developer wasn't me. It was a marketing director who'd never written a single line of code. I'd asked Blaine afterward quietly if it was an oversight. He'd chuckled. Don't worry. You're the genius behind the curtain. We just needed a cleaner face. Up front. I nodded. That's what I did back then. Nod and keep working. A year later, we hosted a demo for a visiting defense agency. I offered to lead the walkthrough, especially the dynamic redirect feature I'd spent 4 months perfecting. Blaine turned me down. Let Tyler handle it. He presents well. Tyler botched it. Of course, real-time adaptation was actually pre-mapped contingency logic. I had to sit backstage correcting the logs in real time while he took questions. I'd written answers for even the team started skipping my name when referencing core systems. I became back-end support. Legacy logic. Never architect, never origin. But the clearest memory was the one that mattered. Most. 2 months before this, I was handed a stack of transfer documents from legal. A full IP components, rights consolidated under company ownership. I read every line twice. There was a clause about core system privileges, vague, sweeping. I asked about layer 17. The legal rep said, it's implied. We own the whole tree. I replied, then write it out. They didn't. I didn't sin, and I never submitted my final biometric token. Layer 17 stayed off the record, off the architecture diagrams, outside legal reach. No one pushed back because no one believed I'd be the one to stand in the way. They assumed I'd fold as always. They were wrong. I looked down at the mirror node. Layer 17 status, locked. Authorization pending owner validation. Cambria Wells. Unconfirmed. I let out a small laugh, dry, quiet, more breath than sound. All those meetings where I was told to step aside. All those times I was asked to be a team player. All the credit rerouted. All the erasers dressed as strategy. And now, the thing they tried to own without understanding was out of their reach because they never truly saw the woman behind it. They filed me under supporting role, but I had already engraved my name deep into the code where no PR deck could touch it. I didn't need headlines. I didn't need apologies. They thought they had everything, but they forgot the one layer no one else was allowed to hold. And I never let go. They called me 6 times in under 4 minutes. By the 3rd ring, I muted my phone. By the 4th, I turned it face down on the kitchen table and let the soundless vibration crawl across the wood like a panic, too proud to admit it was begging. I didn't answer, not Blaine, not legal. Not the executive assistant who once asked me to order lunch for a meeting I wasn't invited to. Even though I'd architected the system they were discussing at 10:20 a.m., I poured myself coffee. Blaine, I imagined, was probably yelling into a Bluetooth headset. The irony, he didn't know the command hierarchy. He couldn't even distinguish between Ravenlock's control shell and the dynamic routing layer. But he did know how to fire someone efficiently, publicly, quietly. And now his big defense demo had just blinked off the screen at 10:17 a.m. with a message none of them understood. Authorization incomplete. Signature missing. At 10:24 a.m., a new name flashed on my phone. Colin Alvarez. I hadn't heard from Colin in almost 4 years, a junior engineer when I was lead architect. Shy, always stayed late. Once told me I was the only reason he didn't quit during onboarding. I remember sitting beside him when his son was in ICU, walking him through diagnostics for 32 straight hours. I tapped the message open. You stayed 32 hours for me when my son was in ICU. You're not alone. My throat locked. I stared at those words for a full minute. I'd been holding the rage in so tightly all morning. I'd forgotten there was another emotion buried under it. Grief. And now, beneath that, something else was flickering to life, something warmer, older, like trust. Before I could even process it, a second message came in. I'm consulting with Lucent Partners now. Just a heads up, we own 12% of Ventron. They don't know I'm looped in. I blinked. Lucent Partners, the firm Blaine had been courting for their Series E defense expansion. The same firm that had walked away from their last 3 meetings. Without explanation, Colin was inside. I stepped outside into the sunlight. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. The breeze didn't ask anything from me. It didn't care about missed calls or email timestamps, or loyalty tests at 12:02 a.m. For once, I wasn't just defending myself. I was holding the keys and someone who remembered was already behind the door. I sat on the bench outside my building, hands still trembling slightly from everything that had just unfolded. The city moved around me, oblivious to the quiet war waging inside office buildings and courtrooms. I let the warmth of the sun settle against my face. How many nights had I spent under cold fluorescent lights, rewriting code that no one else dared touch? How many times was I the last one to leave? The only one who saw the system for what it truly was, not just a defense grid, but a living architecture of consequence, trust, and ethics. They didn't see that. They only saw profit, margins, and political gains. Now, for the first time, I felt something shift, not just externally, but in me. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't scared. I was awake. I thought back to the contract clause I buried months ago, clause 173. No party shall engage, simulate, or present any demonstration of the full Ravenlock framework without the dual authentication trigger originated by its primary architect, me. They never read that version. They assumed it was all code and wires. They forgot what I stood for. I wasn't out for revenge. I was here to reclaim truth. As minutes ticked by, I received 3 more messages, one from a former intern, one from a data scientist I mentored, and one from a defense advisor whose brother I once helped secure housing after a wildfire displaced him. Each carried the same current. We remember what you did. We're with you. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I looked down at my phone again. The legal team was still calling, scrambling. Let them. I stood, brushed imaginary dust from my coat sleeves, and walked back inside. My next step wasn't about proving anything. It was about reminding them that integrity doesn't sleep and neither does memory. I didn't respond right away. I let them spiral a little longer. The screen still glowed with the last message from Jules. They're asking for a call now. Blaine's in full damage control mode. But I just stared at the cursor blinking in the empty email draft I'd opened hours earlier. My fingers rested lightly on the keyboard. No adrenaline. No rush, just clarity. I reread the contract one more time. Clause 64. Termination without formal written process voids all technology transfer and nullifies exclusive rights to the encrypted code. Biometric unlock privileges revert to the originator. I hadn't written that clause. I just insisted it stay outside my window. The morning light cut sharp through the blinds. I hadn't slept since that email, but exhaustion had long morphed into something tighter. Steadier, a stillness that didn't ask for revenge. It asked for correction. At 8:49 a.m., I typed 3 lines. System is stable. Clause 6.14 applies. Available for formal dialogue, no salutation. No emotion, just a mirror held up to the exact wording they once waved at me when I asked about hazard pay. I hit send. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No reply. But I didn't need one yet. Somewhere inside Venturin's boardroom, Blaine was probably pacing. His legal team scrambling through shared folders and archived PDFs, trying to decipher what Clause 6.14 meant and how far it stretched. But the moment I sent that email, the power dynamic shifted. They wanted me desperate. They got something else. I opened a new tab, navigated to the licensing status dashboard for Ravenlock. The interface still showed core system encrypted, layer 17 authorization required. Every subprotocol below it blinked red, inaccessible. They hadn't touched the foundation. Couldn't a notification blinked? Internal memo leak. Someone forwarded a string of panicked messages from inside. Most technical damage control chatter, but one line caught my eye. She's not demanding money. She's asking for acknowledgement. When the noise softened, they were expecting a price tag, a buyback, an ultimatum. But what I wanted was simpler, deeper. I didn't want their settlement funds. I wanted the truth written down. A public letter signed by the board affirming that the core encryption framework, including Layer 17, was solely developed and protected by Cambria Wells. An acknowledgement that Ravenlock's success stemmed from a woman they deemed replaceable at 12:02 a.m. No edits. No PR polish, just truth. I closed my laptop for the first time in what felt like years. The sun had shifted again, light, warm, and falling across the carpet like an invitation. I walked barefoot into the kitchen, poured coffee, and sipped it in silence. No more late-night calls. No emergency patches. No quiet erasers of my name from product decks. I had already built the thing they thought they owned. Now I was reclaiming what they couldn't replicate: integrity. Let's see how they try to trademark that. By the time the first financial alert pinged on my phone, I was slicing an apple in my mother's kitchen. The sound didn't match the soft hum of morning radio and her oxygen pump, but I didn't flinch. I glanced at the screen. 10:03 a.m. Venturon holdings down 6.2%. 10:15 a.m. potential breach of contract delays, $1.30 B deal. Source says. 10:18 a.m. CEO, unavailable for comment. I set the apple slices on a napkin and slid them toward my mother, who nodded without words. Her hand was still bruised from last week's episode. She looked at me with quiet pride, hiding behind tired eyes. I said nothing. I didn't need to. At 10:23 a.m., Blaine's name lit up my phone again. I didn't answer. He'd left 2 voicemails. Earlier voice stretched thin, uncertain whether he was furious or afraid. Instead, I opened my inbox. Subject: urgent clarification requested on Clause 6.14. They were trying to spin it, still clinging to the idea that a contract clause was just paper, not protection. But my calm had crystallized into something colder than anger. Certainty. The clause was airtight. Section 6.14 required explicit biometric reauthorization upon termination of the originator without 72 hours formal notice. The legalese had confused even our in-house attorneys until I showed them how to write it. And now they were reaping its sharp precision. By 11:11 a.m., one of the investors moved. Not just any investor, Calder Berkman, the one who'd personally sat across from me during that rainy afternoon strategy session 2 years ago. The one where I showed him the live stress test of Ravenlock's reaction engine with my voice command as its trigger. His press release was short. Venturin's recent actions have caused material concern. We are divesting effective immediately. Our commitment was never to a company. It was to an architect hand. She is no longer there.